Hello, my name is Matt Whitman. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, and today I would like to start by attempting an old man rant. I've been doing more of these lately. I feel like I'm getting a lot better at it. Here we go. When I was a kid, you could beat video games. You go to the store and you spend some money and you buy a physical copy of the game, and then you go and you play the game with your friends and you memorize the patterns, and if you beat the boss at the end and you saw the final victory screen, then you were the winner. You beat the video game. It was very easy. Everybody knew in my little neighborhood who had beaten. Wait, I forgot to do the old man rant voice. I'm out of it now. Whatever. Everybody in the neighborhood knew who had beaten which games because that was a discernible thing. You knew what winning looked like. But now, I got these games on my phone. A lot of them I didn't even put there. I try to delete them, but it's like playing whack-a-mole. Samsung just jams new games onto my phone with every update. I didn't ask for that. I don't want that. What gives you the right? There, that sounded more old man ranty. Now we're back on track. But every now and then I see a game on there. I'm like, oh, that looks kind of fun. I got like 7 minutes to kill here while I wait in line. And then nothing happens. There's no advancing, or if you start to advance, they start asking for money, like actual American money, dollars that you earn from your job. They want that to get, like, do you want to have the purple jacket on your clown ninja? I don't think I do. For $7? Whoa, I definitely don't want that. What even is this game? Every level is the same thing, and there's no end to these, I have discovered. And so all these games that I have on my phone, you can't beat them. There is no beat them. The second you start to play, you lost because you're going to waste your time, and eventually you're going to get to a point where they come around and they're asking you for money for stupid things that you would never want to do, like actual money for stupid things in a video game. It just doesn't work for me. But the point is, if somebody were to look over my shoulder and see me trying out a stupid phone game, and they were like, hey, have you beaten that? Did you win? My answer would have to be, I have no idea. I'm not sure I know what winning is. The objectives are unclear, and it seems to be very, very cyclical. Likewise, in the book of Nehemiah, you get to the end of this thing and you ask yourself the question, did Nehemiah win? Was he successful here? And I think our answer has to be, I have no idea. I don't think Nehemiah even has any idea whether or not he won. This is, frankly, a pretty baffling affair here. If the goal of the whole project, and then we're talking the book of Ezra and the book of Nehemiah as well, which covers, of course, stuff from roughly 539, 538 BC up until at least the 440s BC, so like 100 years. If the goal of this 100 years was to build a temple, physically, that is, just make the building stand there, and there it is, and you can look at it and you can see it, and like that. All right, now there's a temple again. And to get a wall up so that people couldn't easily knock over the temple, and then you could look at the wall in Jerusalem and be like, all right, yep, there that is. There's a wall. I wonder if it has gates. Yep. Okay, it does. It has a bunch of gates. That seems to be a functioning wall. Then I guess Nehemiah and Zerubbabel and everybody else involved, I guess they succeeded over this 100-year window that we've been looking at. But I think you would agree, I mean, if you've been hanging out with me at all, if you've been looking at these books, the objective here is more complex than that. It's not just make a building and then put a fence around it. The building means something. The fence around it means something. The building is the metaphor for the centrality of the worship of God for the Jewish people in everything they do, and the wall around it is a metaphor for the fact that these are a set-apart people who are going to do things weird and different, but there's a grand redemptive purpose, is what happens inside the walls is meant to immediately and eventually affect everything that's happening outside the walls. Remember, the real objective of Ezra and Nehemiah and this whole 100-year era that we're just wrapping up having looked at, the real objective was to rebuild the people, to take all the lessons that we've learned through the Old Testament, all of the things that the prophets have said, and to put it all together and finally, for the first time, really nail it. And I guess if that's the objective, I'm coming away from the end of Nehemiah, the last verse of which we read yesterday together, feeling like maybe this wasn't a total win. Maybe there were wins, but Nehemiah did not ultimately win this game. And indeed, the book concludes with the following lines spoken by Nehemiah. Remember me with favor, oh my God. It's not, and that's how I won, and we finally got everything back on track. High five, oh my God. Nope, it isn't that tone at all. After chapter 13, it sounds like the guy's frankly a little frustrated, defeated, and unsure of the results of what he's been pouring his energy into. Now think about it. What we've seen over the course of Ezra and Nehemiah is 3 commissionings from 3 kings who theoretically shouldn't even care about this stuff. King number 1 is Cyrus the Great. In the 530s BC, immediately after conquering the Babylonians, he's like, you know what? I'm going to do things differently than my predecessors, the Babylonians and the Assyrians. They were jerks, and people didn't like them, and they rebelled. And I'm going to see if we can catch more flies with honey than we can with vinegar. So I'm letting some people go back and rebuild their temples of worship and their ancestral homelands. And first of all, I pick you, Jews. You get to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild things. I hear you're missing a temple. Why don't you go fix and make right what the Babylonians did to you? Go get them. Get going. Okay, well, that's awesome. There's a commissioning from a king who theoretically shouldn't care. And the Jewish people aren't like, wait, you're morally compromised and bad. I'm not working with you. No, instead they're like, great, let's just do it. Let's seize this opportunity. And even though it's not an easy process, they go and rebuild the temple, which is supposed to be this thriving hub of everything they're about culturally and religiously and even economically, everything that they're about. Then there's another commissioning that happens a little later on in the book of Nehemiah, where Ezra gets commissioned by Artaxerxes to go back to Jerusalem with another group of returning exiles and create law and order and get things working there. And Ezra seizes on this opportunity with another compromised king to go and advance the grand redemptive plan, the grand story of his people. And he does so by saying, we got to separate from our neighbors. We're unique people set apart. And even though it sounds weird, he accomplishes this by convincing everyone that they need to do a mass divorce from all of their entangling intermarriages with their neighbors. Understandably, that sounds very weird to you and me, but we see in an ancient world context the very negative effects of those decisions just one book later as we get into Nehemiah. Then there's a third commissioning, right? This is Nehemiah's commissioning. Artaxerxes, once again, tells Nehemiah, you can go back and rebuild the walls of this city. Better get it done. Artaxerxes isn't an idiot. He knows that putting up those walls is not just going to protect the temple and their way of life, but it's also going to isolate them from their neighbors. He knows that is what his cupbearer, Nehemiah's people, want to do. So Nehemiah goes back and does that. But then in just one chapter, the final chapter of the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, it seems like all 3 of those incredibly awesome turns of events, all 3 of those commissionings from great Persian kings, all 3 of those once-in-a-lifetime opportunities get more or less undone by the apathy and the selfishness of the returned exiles in Jerusalem. As soon as Nehemiah is not paying attention, they undo the effectiveness of the temple with the stupid things that Tatnai did, and by not providing for the temple economically, they undo Ezra's reforms as they go right back to intermarrying with all of their neighbors, and they undo Nehemiah's accomplishment of building the wall by making the wall effectively a moot point by allowing anybody in and out anytime they want to come, including their enemies and including those who undermine the Jewish people's commitment to honoring the Sabbath. Why have walls if you leave all the gates open and just let anything happen as though there were no walls anyway? So Nehemiah comes back desperately here at the end in chapter 13, and he's pulling out people's hair, and he's beating people, and he's dragging people around by the ear. I don't know if that's literally in the text, but he's making them repeat their oaths and all of this. But look, in the same way, I get to the end of 20 minutes of playing a stupid phone game that I don't even know where it came from on my phone, and I'm like, what am I doing? I don't understand the objectives. I don't think I lost, but I definitely didn't win. I'm not sure where we're at. In the same way, there's tremendous ambiguity about what winning looks like in these stupid phone games. So I think there's ambiguity as to the outcome of this entire enterprise. And if there's ambiguity about whether or not Nehemiah won, then I don't think Nehemiah won. And again, I think that is evidenced by how tepid he is in his closing remarks of this book. And remember, this is the last line of the narrative of the Old Testament, which is a huge amount of words and a huge amount of story covering a huge amount of time. Exhale. Remember me with favor, oh my God. It just feels like I tried. This is way more complicated than it seemed. I really thought we could build a temple, we could make some people honor their vows, and we could put up a wall, and maybe this would go to plan, but I don't know. In the end, Nehemiah reflects back on his moral, spiritual epiphany of chapter 1, where he prayed, hey, I have blame in what's gone wrong with our people. My fathers have blame. We all have blame in what's gone wrong, and I'm going to try to do something to make it better. I'm going to own my part. In the end, he has gone from a guy who recognized that to a guy who did something about it and followed through on what he said he was going to do. And so personally, I hope he could put his head on his pillow at night and feel like that was a pretty dang good effort. But it sure looks like, and it sure sounds like this is a dude who's going to put his head on his pillow at night and say, okay, I think I did my best, but I'm not sure I won. So the question remains, after all of this time you and I put into it, did Nehemiah succeed? Well, he clearly had successes, but if his objective was to build that wall as the final thing to cement all of the other building and all of the other reforms, it doesn't seem to have totally worked. Or maybe it worked in a mutated way he didn't intend. And if his objective was to be the kind of leader who could rebuild the people, did it work? In flashes, some of it stuck. There was certainly a rebuilding. There was certainly a cultural change that happens among his people after this. But when we see these people again, 400 years later in the context of Jesus, we discover, I don't think that change was exactly what Nehemiah was hoping for. I know dang well whether I won or lost an 8-bit video game when I was a kid playing that. I absolutely have no clue whatsoever whether I've won or lost when I play a modern phone game. And I think Nehemiah's situation here is a little bit more like the latter than the former, but we'll keep breaking that down over the next few days. All right, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.